some of us used to attend a church that talked about money a lot, right? Like it was like all the time, every event they had, they took up a collection, right? In fact, they took up multiple collections at some events. It just seemed like they were always talking about money. They were always talking about, they needed money for this and for that. And sometimes it was the carpet, and sometimes it was the roof, and sometimes it was the windows, sometimes the HVAC machine, sometimes it was an event they were trying to save up for, or, a project they were planning. And it was like all the time they talked about money. There was always a need. And the reason you knew there was always a need is because they always talked about that need, right? And if you were ever at a church like that, here's what happened. You felt pressured to give. Because it's like, if I just give, maybe they'll stop talking about it so much. And you tried that and you discovered, no, they didn't stop them from talking about it, right? But it's like, you just feel the pressure of it because it's like, obviously they have these needs, they keep talking about them. And I'm guessing that at some point, you got tired of it. In fact, if you're a couple and your guy was with you, I'm guessing your guy was like, oh, this is just, I'm tired of this, right? It's like all they want is my money, right? Because that's all they seem to talk about is money. And so it's like, he wasn't happy and so you weren't happy. And it's like, you just got tired of it. And so here's what happened. You left that church that needed your money and you came here where we hardly talk about it, right? I mean, think about it. Occasionally we'll just say, want to thank you, those of you who, regularly and consistently support, our budget here and all the things that we do. Or we'll give you opportunities to help out like we just did, just got done last week with Flagstaff Elementary School up in Baltimore City. The school that's, has some great needs, and we've been partners with them for a couple of years now, and just a chance again to bless them as they start a school year, give them some food to put in their pantry, some notebooks, some pencils, and all those things that the kids need, backpacks. We'll talk about those kind of things, but we don't every week get up and say, oh, by the way, HVAC, unit died this week. And so it's time to pony up, right? We don't do pledge cards at the start of the year to have you sign up, people calling, come into your house and want to sit into you and talk about how much you're going to give this year. We don't do any of that stuff. And the problem with us not talking about it is this. You say to yourself, well, they don't talk about money, so here's your conclusion, they don't need any money, right? I mean, I understand why you would do that, because it's like if they never talk about it, there must not be a need. But you look around here as you enter this space and you go, but there's, the lights and all the stuff, the musicians, and if you go and have coffee afterwards or you get a milkshake for your kids, or by the way, it isn't just for kids, you can have a milkshake too, right? But it's like, they're not charging for this. They do great stuff for their kids. Today they're having this incredible science program. In a couple weeks, there's this big reptile show for the kids. All this money that we pour into not just stuff that happens here in this building, but into our community. And you're thinking, there's something going on. And here's the irrational part. We don't want to go to a church that constantly talks about money, right? Because that's just really uncomfortable. And on the other side, why would we give to a church that doesn't seem to need our money? And sometimes I think some of us say to ourselves, there's got to be something that we don't know. Something's going on. This doesn't just happen, right? There's got to be money coming from someplace. And it's not like we have this huge donor that gave us, millions of dollars and we're just living off that. That's not the case. What happens is people just like you regularly give into our local budget, which literally funds everything that happens in and through this building. And sometimes I've talked about this before, that, if you give a tithe and you say, I've helped this church, I've helped my local church, I've done my part to support my local church, what you've done is to support 5 families in this local church, which we're appreciative of, all right? Don't get me wrong on that. But if you said, I've given my tithe, thus I've helped my local church, not really. It hasn't paid for the lights, it hasn't paid for the papers, it hasn't paid for the crafts your kids will get, or the milkshakes they'll drink later, or any of the kind of experiences you have through this place. But what you need to know is there are people who regularly give and support what we do here, and that's why we can do all the things we do and not have to come back to you and say, hey, oh, by the way, this isn't working any longer, or this we got to repair, or this we got to upgrade, and all those kinds of pieces. So for those of you who regularly support what we do here, I have something to say directly to you, and here it is. Thank you, and I mean that seriously. It is great to be in a place where we don't have to talk about money all the time. Because it is one of the things that people what they think about churches in general, right? They're just after my money, right? They're judgmental people, and they're just after my money. And the reason they say that is they've had those experiences that some of us have had, where we've gone places and it's like, they take up an offering at the start of the day, and in the middle of the service, and at the end of the service, right? It's like, and they talk about money all the time, and they're always asking for money, and it's like, all they want's my money because that's all they talk about, and we don't want to give that picture to anybody because we're not after the money. So I want to say thank you. Thank you to those of you who regularly support what we do here. The reality is we could not do what we do without you. There's no way we could do all the things we do without, people regularly supporting what we do. Now, if you're not one of those people, don't raise your hand, but if you're not one of those people, right? You're the ones where I say, thank you for giving, and you're like, I know he's not talking to me because I've never given anything, right? Or I give $20 occasionally. If that's you, here's my question for you. And I don't mean that as a critical question. I think it's a probing question. I think it's a question we need to ask ourselves. Why not, right? Because I know a lot of your experiences would say this, that you love this church. In fact, I was talking to somebody just a couple of weeks ago, and they said, we've been coming here for 9 years, Mike. We moved to this area, and we were going to, kind of church shop. We were going to go see a bunch of different churches. Our mistake was we came to New Hope at the first, and we never left, right? So 9 years later, they're still here, right? And it's like, yeah, I understand why. I understand why you would want to come here and be part of this. Because you love what it's done in your life, right? And what it's doing in your life. It's given you a place to belong and connect and learn and grow. Maybe you say, I love the music, right? I love the messages. Yeah, and maybe it's you're glad that your significant other likes to come here because he knows that in 90 minutes or less we're going to be done. And that's kind of how guys work, right? Just tell me how long it's going to be, how long I have to behave for, so I know going in, right? And so if it's like 90 minutes or less, I can do that. And you're happy for that, right? There's something good about that. Maybe you love what it does for kids, right? Because you see all the kids around here and all the activities and all the things that happen for them. And it's a great place if you have kids to be. In fact, I know some of you tell me those stories, right? That your kids throughout the week are asking, is the day today we go to church? And you're like, no, we got a few more days, right? But they're excited to come here. I love the fact that your kids are excited to come to church. Because that's a great gift for a parent, as opposed to, I don't want to go. No, we're going to church. I don't want to go. I have a tummy ache. I don't feel good. Get in the car, right? I mean, it's not a great picture. But they come here, and again, they can have milkshakes, and I'm thankful that you guys let them have milkshakes because you're helping them enjoy what happens here. You love that this is a place that you can be involved. You don't even have to be a member here to be involved here. You can sign up today and serve in some way. We don't expect you to kind of sign up for the whole thing. Just start something. And you love what it does, in and for our community because we do a lot of stuff in and for our community. And that's because we recognize that what's good for our community is good for everybody. Some of you have gotten to the place, in fact, to say that this is my church. Even though it's like you've never been kind of a part of a church before, or, you're not part of this particular, brand of Christianity, but it's like, no, Mike, I've gotten to the place where, this is my church. This is where I come the most. This is where I kind of feel connected. I love all these kind of things. I love the intentionality. I love the people. I love the community. I love all those kinds of things. And the reality is, we want to talk today about this. The cost of keeping something we like. And the cost of keeping something you like is to have a plan. Which sounds kind of like, right? Because that sounds like a budget, and most of us do not like budgets. Some of you love budgets, right? But for a lot of us, it's like, we just hate budgets because budgets remind us that we can't spend what we want to spend in the moment we want to spend it, right? Because most of us are kind of impulse spenders, right? If we want it, we're going to get it. And I'm asking you to kind of rethink that because having a plan means you're not going to be impulsive. You're going to be thoughtful, intentional about what you're giving your money to. And I think you ought to do the same way in giving to the church, not be an impulse. I don't want you to go online to, this afternoon and give thousands of dollars to New Hope. I don't want you to just kind of an impulse kind of. That's not my goal here. My goal is to encourage you to think through a plan that will be regular and consistent and watch what that does in your life and what it does, the impact it has on it. In fact, Jesus talked about this idea of having a plan when he talked about, being a follower of his. We just got done with a series all about, the essentials of following Jesus. And so there's one more thing that Jesus said about, following him. He says, whoever is not willing to carry his own cross and follow me cannot be my follower, right? Jesus says, there's a cost to this whole following me thing. In fact, he says, I want you to think about that cost before you get too far along in this following piece. Then he tells one of these stories, right? He says, listen, if you want to build a tower, it makes sense that you're first going to sit down and decide, calculate the cost, come up with the plans, right? It makes sense. You don't just start building and throw stuff together. And you want to do that so that you can see if you have enough money to finish a job. Or are you going to get kind of partway through? And he says, listen, because if you don't calculate the cost, right, you might lay the foundation, but you were not able to finish. And then everybody who walks by was going to laugh and mock you, which seems like a weird thing for Jesus to say, but Jesus is saying, this is kind of how it works, right? That if you don't kind of follow through, can't finish the job, people are going to go, that's too bad, right? They couldn't finish it. They didn't have enough money to carry it all the way through completion. They'll say, the person who began to build, this person began to build but was not able to finish. Or he says, let me tell you another story. If a king is going out to battle another king, right? They're going to have this big battle. Doesn't he will sit down first and plan, right? And here's what he's going to plan. He's going to decide if he and his 10,000 soldiers can if they can engage the other king who has 20,000 soldiers. Now, right away, as you hear that, you think, well, that doesn't sound like good odds. But he's saying, you're going to sit down and calculate, do I think my 10,000 can beat their 20,000? Do we have strategic advantage? How are we going to plan this? How are we going to attack? And he says, listen, if he can't overcome them, he doesn't see this as a winning proposition, then while the other king is still far away, he's going to send a messenger to speak to him and ask for some terms of peace, right? Let's kind of settle this in some way so nobody has to die. And Jesus' point is pretty simple. And that is that we need to think things through. We need to understand the cost, and we need to have a plan. Now, my experience has been when we talk about having a plan, for some of us, we have one of three responses. First of all, we might say, Mike, I haven't thought about it, right? Haven't really thought about it. Because it seems like everything's kind of working, and I know there's got to be money flowing around there somewhere, but it just seems to be working. You never talk about money, so I haven't thought about it because why would I think about it? Nobody's, said there's a need for it. Or you don't see that reason to give, right? Again, because if somebody else is already flipping the bill, right? If somebody's already paying for all the stuff that's here, why would I help with that? And maybe the last piece is simply this. They don't think we can, right? That things are tight right now. And I understand that things are tight right now. We live in this area that things have gotten really tight since the start of the year. And for some of us, you've lost jobs, right? You've had to shift careers. A lot of stuff has happened. So I understand the idea that, we don't think we can because things are tight. And I'm not asking you to make things tighter. I'm just asking you to think about something. Because here's my question for you. What if what's true for us at home is true for us here at church? Things are tight, right? That prices have gone up. I was just looking the other day I'll give you an example. Our insurance for our property just went from $7,500 a year to $12,500 a year. I'm not great at math, but I think that's like a 60-some% increase. We didn't know it was happening. It just happened. It happened, we just get the bill and it's like, that's what you got to pay. And it's like, electricity's up, right? We got a new building, that's part of it, but also electricity's up. You just start adding up, paper's up, everything's up, right? The blessings of the tariffs. Wasn't meant as a political statement, just an observation. But, right, so if it's true for you at home, I want you just to say, what if it's also true for us here at church? Costs are going up, and again, not being able to plan for that and budget for that because who knew that was going to happen? Now we have those pieces. And we're not coming to you saying, hey, we're way behind, we're struggling. But I just want you to recognize that if you're experiencing things at home, we're probably experiencing those same things here. Now, Paul, the guy who became a follower of Jesus after being one of his enemies, and has written the majority of the part of the Bible we call the New Testament. He offers some advice about this idea of giving and having a plan. And the context is, he was coming back to the church in Corinth, and he'd been bragging about him. Paul, if you read this letter, he's kind of been really bragging about this Corinth church, or how great they are, how they've stepped up to the plate. And now he's like, folks, I've been bragging about you, and here's my fear, that you're going to let me down, right? All my bragging is going to be for naught because, you're not going to follow through with the commitments you made, the financial commitments you made, because they were taking up offerings to help the church in Jerusalem who were going through those experiences, right? People were losing jobs. They had, because they were becoming followers of Jesus, they had lost, business opportunities. They lost friends over those pieces, lost family members, and they were struggling, and the church there was trying to help them, and they were raising money all over the place. And so Paul says, hey, I'm going to send some folks, and when they come, I want you to be gracious to them, and I want you to, show your support. I want you to meet up with all my bragging about you. And then he offers us this bit of advice that is not a religious advice. It's just a how life works advice. He says, remember this. The person who plants a little, who sows sparingly, will have a small harvest, will reap sparingly. In other words, if you only put a couple of seeds in the ground, if I put 5 seeds in the ground, I can't expect more than 5 plants. But the person who plants a lot, who sows generously, will have a big harvest, will reap generously. That the more you put in, the more possibilities are coming out. And again, that's not a religious thing. That's just a way things work. You can't have, one seed producing 20 plants. That's just not how it works. So he's saying, think about that, if you're sow just a little, you can only get a little back. And the more generous you are, the more possibilities there are for this generous harvest. And then as he writes to these folks, he gets to the heart of the issue. He says, each of you should give as you have decided in your heart to give. This is a choice. This is a decision that all of us have to make. He said, you don't have to look at some envelope or looking for some percentages, because that's just somebody's idea of what it ought to be. This ought to be a personal piece. This ought to be something that you're making a choice and a decision on. And, by the way, in that process, you should not give reluctantly. You shouldn't kind of feel like, got to hold back, right? You got to take care of myself. And you should not give because you feel forced to give out of compulsion. Because some of us have been in those spots where we felt like, we have to give, right? We're not a happy giver, but we're like I have to give, right? Because they just keep needing money. I'm going to do something. But we shouldn't give out of that being forced or compulsion. Then he drops this great idea. He says, listen, God loves the person who gives happily, who gives cheerfully. Which some of us may be thinking, how is that possible? How would somebody give away their hard-earned money happily, cheerfully, right? But he's saying, no, God loves that kind of person because that person recognizes something that other people don't recognize. That's not really theirs in the first place. And that maybe they got that money in order for them to give it away, not to keep it for themselves. Because what if this is really about our mindset? What if it's really about how you and I see money? Over the years, in doing premarital counseling, right, we one of the things we talk about is finances, right? And oftentimes couples have dramatically different ideas about, how money gets spent, how money gets used, even how we see money, right? And I've done my own self-processing on this, and for me, money is about security, which, by the way, is not a great idea about money, but it's just how I'm wired. And so I was kind of raised that way, and so the idea of having money in the bank gives you some security so I don't feel like I'm living paycheck to paycheck, because I've done that before, and that is just like painful for me as a person. But the problem with when you find your security in money is that you want to keep your money. You don't want to let anybody else have your money, because if you give it away, there's no security there. And so Lori can tell you some terrible stories about when we were first married that are embarrassing for me now. If we were, we'd gone from, getting paid twice a month to getting paid once a month. I don't know if you've ever got paid once a month. If they ever give you that option, do not take it. Because it's like the worst, right? I mean, it's like, imagine, you're getting paid every 2 weeks. It's like, I only got a couple more days, then I'm going to get paid again. But if it's a month, you got a whole month to wait, right? And always that last week of the month was just like, we'd have like Cheerios and kidney beans in the cabinet. And that was it. It's like, there's not a whole lot you can do with Cheerios and kidney beans. Trust me. We tried some stuff. None of it is any good. But, you're kind of out of money, and it's like, what do we do, right? And so for me, what it is, security again, I'm like, okay, Lori, here's the money to go to the grocery store. When she got home, I'd say, show me the receipt and give me the change. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was. I look back and it was horrible. But it was not me not recognizing what money meant to me and how I needed to change what it meant to me. So what if it really is about our mindset? Because then Paul says, not only does God love, a happy and cheerful giver, and, you shouldn't give, reluctantly, and you shouldn't give like you're under pressure. But he says, listen, by the way, God can give you more blessings than you need. Which some of us are thinking, all right, now we're getting to it. Yeah, give me that stuff about God giving me more, right? Because that's the one I want, I'm going to give you this and he's going to give me so much more. That's the stuff I want to hear. But God, he says, listen, God can give you more blessings than you need. And then you will always have plenty of everything. Which we're like, all right, now we're talking, right? Now I'm going to have the car and the house and the clothes. I'm going to have it all, right? But notice what Paul gives a little description there. He says, enough to give to every good work. Which sounds like the reason we're getting it is not to put it in our pocket, put it in our bank account, but is to use it for good stuff. What if God's blessing isn't just towards us or for us? What if there's another reason that we have what we have? Then he kind of brings it back to the bottom line. He says, listen, God is the one who gives seed to the farmer and bread for food, right? God's the part behind all of this, right? He's the one who gives the seed in the first place that the farmer uses. And oh, by the way, the bread that ends up being made, God gives that as well, because again, it's part of the whole process. And he, talking about God, will supply and make it grow. He'll multiply your seed so that there will be a great harvest of your righteousness. That there's this huge payoff. Righteousness is simply our right living, our good living. And here's my question. What if that's true? What if it's true that really everything does come from God and is provided by God? And is provided by God not just for our use, our enjoyment, our consumption. And there's a little bit of that, but what if it's for some greater purposes? Some things that we can combine with other people's things in order to have a bigger impact than just our things alone. Because not only what if it's true, what if we choose to live like it's true? What would that look like if we were to adopt an attitude that it's really not mine in the first place? And if I have it, maybe I have it for a purpose greater than me. I mean, what if we are made for more than just us? Because by the way, I kind of think we are. In fact, I think when we limit ourselves to just us, we have limited ourselves. And in the process have sort of lost ourselves. The reality is that everything costs. I told you, our insurance has gone up, electricity's gone up. Adding this new building is going to add more expenses to us. Cost of living goes up, so we have to, pay our employees more. And I'm not being disgruntled about that. It's just the reality that everything costs. Just like everything in your home cost, everything costs here as well. The question is, are we willing to cover the cost? And my encouragement is simply this: to help keep the church you enjoy being part of, a church you enjoy being part of. Because the reality is, if you're going to attend a church that doesn't need your money, then you've got to come up with a plan to support it. Does that make sense? If you don't want us to talk about money, make sure we have money. Then we never have to talk about it. When I talk about a plan, I think your plan ought to be thoughtful. You ought to think about it, right? Again, don't, extend yourself too much. But extend yourself enough that it reminds you again that maybe it isn't mine in the first place. Not only should it be thoughtful, it should be intentional. One of the things we encourage folks is to give to our church budget, right? Because out of that budget, we fund everything. We have categories for everything. And we even have categories for things we don't have categories for. Or new projects or possibilities. We have categories for those things so that if something pops up midway through the year, that is a great opportunity for us. We have money, we have funds set aside if we make budget to be able to fund those pieces. So it ought to be intentional, not just like, well, I like what's going on here, I like what's going on there. Give to the whole thing because then the whole thing works together. Lastly, it ought to be planned. It ought to be a part of your regular process of how you think about, what you give, what you pay, what you do with your money. Now here's the cold, hard reality. If you've kind of heard me today and thought, Mike, what are you going to do? You're not going to come to my house. I won't let you come to my house, right? And you're not going to pressure me, and I'm not looking to pressure you, right? But here's the cold, hard truth. If you're not willing to sit down and come up with a plan, here's what we will have to do as a church at New Hope. Are you ready? Here's what we're going to do if you don't. We're not going to talk about money more, because again, you don't want us to do it, and we don't want to do it anymore. We're going to continue being a place of new hope for people, whether you give or not, and whether they give or not. We're going to provide a place for you to continue your faith journey. We're going to continue providing great kid spaces so that our kids grow up with a positive attitude towards God and the church. We're going to continue to look for good ways to do good in our community. And again, the reason for that is when good things happen in our community, that's good for all of us. We're going to continue to be a relevant, safe place to bring someone to. And we're going to continue to provide opportunities to live out our faith in tangible and meaningful ways. That's what you're going to force us to do if you don't step up to the plate. Which you're asking yourself this question right now. And if you're asking yourself that question, my return question would be this. Maybe we don't need it as much as you need it. Because what if giving does something in us that nothing else will? In fact, Jesus gave us a little insight into this when he said, it isn't just where our heart, that our money follows our heart. We kind of convince ourselves that, if my heart's someplace, my money's automatically going to follow. And Jesus says, no, you can actually control where your heart goes. He said, where your treasure is, where the stuff that you value most is put, your heart's going to follow there. You're going to automatically go there. And so we have the ability to help our hearts go to the places we want them to go. And again, if you like what we do here, if this is your church, if you love New Hope, then maybe you can help yourself in the process of helping yourself. So let me just say this. If you don't have a plan, go home and come up with one. Come up with a plan. And again, it doesn't have to be, dramatic and great. I mean, it's just one category, church budget. How much can I give to support something that's good? How can I help keep this thing that I enjoy something I enjoy? So go home and make a plan, and one that will help you give to support good things, not just us, but there's lots of good organizations. Help us to live, because that's kind of key and important, right? And give us some money to save. And there's a reason I put it in that order, is because my experience is if we put living first, saving and giving comes way, way down the list, because you know how life is. That sweet pair of shoes you saw, and you've been thinking about for like 5 minutes, and you made the trip all the way to the mall, and you hate to have to make that trip again, right? So it's like, well, I just go ahead and buy them now, right? And so you're gonna live, right? You're at the grocery store, and that looks really good. That's that's on sale. That's a good deal, and you're gonna buy. And we get all focused about the living, and then the whole saving and giving ends up as second thoughts. Because all of us, my experience has been, all of us tell ourselves, I can't really afford to do that right now. And I wonder if we can afford not to do that. See, the reality is it takes money to do what we do here. It takes a lot of money. But here's the thing I want you to know clearly as you leave here today. It's not about the money for us. It's about what the money lets us do. The money lets us create environments and spaces that literally are changing people's lives. They're changing your kids' lives. They're changing, your friends' lives. They're even changing your lives. That's what money does, is it provides us the ability to have those kinds of impacts. So I want to encourage you to help keep something you like by going to NEWHOPEfulton.org/give and begin to give. Something not only to think about, but something to do today.